And we are back on Patriots 4th and 2, the official podcast, PatsFans.com. I'm Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Derek Havens and Steve Balistrieri. In this episode, we're going to preview the upcoming game for the Patriots against the Dolphins. To help us with this preview, we have on a special guest, and his name is Brian from On the Fin Side. He'll be joining us in just a few minutes. But before that, guys, let's chat a little bit and let's get your thoughts on whatever you want to talk about. Mr. Havens, I'll give you your opening thoughts on this upcoming game, and Brian should be joining us shortly.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the season, guys. I mean, I am looking forward to the season opener, just even tomorrow with the Bills and Rams. I think that should be a good game to kick the season off with. And then the Patriots, obviously, I'm excited for the regular season. I think that we probably, all three of us, have slightly different views of how the season will go, but we don't know until that things kick off. But I will also say this, and we talked about this a little bit last week: Patriots having 10 rookies on the team. I know they're still technically one of the older teams in the league because there's a few guys on the team that kind of sway that, but they do have a lot of younger players over the last couple of years, and I'm interested to see them in live game action. I'm interested to see how it works, and I'm hopeful that what we saw out of the offense is not indicative of how we're going to see this team, perform the first few years, because I will, kind of die on this hill. I do think the most important thing out of the season is Mac Jones's, continued, development, and something I'm hoping is not going to be hindered at all by some of the coaching changes and decisions by Bill Belichick over this offseason. So looking forward to kind of seeing everybody get back on the field this coming week.
Okay, good stuff there, Derek. Steve, over to you. As we get ready for this season to start this week, we'll give our predictions in just a bit after we talk to Brian, but just give me your overall thoughts on how you're feeling today in regards to the Pats.
Well, I mean, prior to training camp started, I was very, very optimistic about the offense, and cautiously, I think how I worded it, optimistic about the defense. Right now, judging from what we saw in preseason and the training camp, I'm a little more optimistic about the defense right now than I am the offense. So, we'll get into season predictions later, but, I'm kind of tempering that until I see what happens down in Miami. I mean, we know they had 2 weeks to work out the kinks, and, I believe Bill Belichick knows how to game plan. So we'll see how they do. I still think the offense needs a lot of work, although Mac Jones has been optimistic lately that they've, solved some of their issues. We'll have to see on Sunday.
Okay, great stuff. Well, guys, just as I mentioned, I'm actually very happy to bring on our guest, and his name is Brian. Brian is from On the Fin Side. Brian, I think you've been with us before. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, we've done this a couple years. I've had Derek on my podcast On the Fin Side for the last 6 or 7 years, previewing the games. We'll be sure to do that again with Derek here if he's available. So thanks again for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. And Brian, just to get us started, first question for me, and I'll go to the guys as well. Just give me your overall thoughts on your new head coach. Again, I don't read too much into press conferences. I'm talking about what you're seeing from the team led by him.
Really, personality-wise, you're talking about a 180-degree difference. I mean, Brian Flores was a tough, defensive-minded, shut-up-and-get-it-done type of head coach, which worked very well with a lot of the veteran defensive guys. I mean, a lot of players, Nick Needham, Raekwon Davis, even the younger type of guys on defense were not happy that Brian Flores isn't here. And then you had the whole, fiasco after that with the Dolphins and getting draft picks taken from him. Mike McDaniel, it's right now, I mean, everybody's happy with their team, or just about everybody is. And it's positive right now because you're going from a head coach who was constantly putting, traffic cones in front of Tua, making things as difficult as possible. He didn't let's be honest, he didn't believe in him in a way an offensive coach is going to. So bringing Mike McDaniel in here, bringing more of that West Coast offense, stretch plays on stretch run plays, which we didn't see here offensively over the last couple of years. That's going to be a big staple of this offense. Obviously, getting Tyreek Hill to pair with Jalen Waddle and Teron Armstead at left tackle. It's really exciting right now, but then again, the season hasn't started yet.
Let me ask you this, because I'm a huge fan, still am, of Brian Flores. And I think, in a way, it's going to be an interesting transition. Thoughts on Josh Boyer being the defensive coordinator? It's funny because years ago, he got all kinds of crap here from his resume. Steve knows this. I want to say, what was it, Steve? The South Dakota School of Mining that he used to coach or something like that?
And the media here used to always ridicule him for that.
Ridiculed him, Brian. Ridiculed.
But that's the Boston media. But, he was the defensive coordinator there last year, if I'm not mistaken. So
right.
It's not going to be – I don't think there'll be a big change there unless Brian thinks so.
No, I don't think it'll be a big change because schematically you're going to see a lot of blitzing, a lot of cover zero looks, a lot of man-to-man coverage with the cornerbacks, even with Byron Jones out. And I really wanted Josh Boyer back because the worst thing that the Dolphins could have done with how well the defense played in the second half of the year is to basically say, okay, we're going to completely change what we're doing. We're going to go more zone and things like that, where so many of these players would not have been a great fit in that type of system. So, guys like, you spent a lot of money on Byron Jones and Xavier Howard to be those cornerbacks on the outside. If you go to more zone heavy instead of man heavy, it kind of takes a little bit away from that. So I'm glad they brought him back because they brought back every single last piece of their defense. Their biggest loss on defense was Justin Coleman, their fourth cornerback. So it was really important they kept this defensive scheme intact because that was their strategy. Keep the defensive scheme intact and then go get some offensive players.
Okay. Before I go over to Derek, I want to ask you about Tua. It's funny because at one point I actually wanted the Patriots to try to draft Tua. I've been a Tua fan, but Tua has not, in my opinion, been as good as I had hoped he would be. But he's improving. Listen, people here can say that he might even be better than Mac Jones. I disagree with that, but that's here in Boston. That's what we do. We rip our own. So your thoughts on the progression of Tua, and he has great weapons. So I'm assuming that should transition well for him.
Right. I mean, Dolphins fans don't want to hear it, but I keep saying Mac Jones was better than Tua last year, even as a rookie. I mean, that's the fact. And
you're welcome back on the show anytime, by the way.
I mean, and the response to
win him over.
I mean, the response will be, well, the Dolphins won both games last year, but there are two teams playing each other, not two quarterbacks going head to head.
Right.
That's not how it works. The whole Tua thing with the fan base, I've never seen anything like it. It's polarizing, to be honest with you. But to take that out of the equation, what needs to happen with Tua is he needs to be the 49ers. He needs to be the Dolphins version of Jimmy Garoppolo. Okay. Yeah, in fact, a better version of Garoppolo. Because, you look at Garoppolo back in 2019, you don't think of him as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, and maybe he's not.
Right.
But the guy threw for 4,000 yards, 29 touchdowns, and that's where Tua needs to get to. I don't expect him to be Josh Allen. I don't expect him to even be Justin Herbert, who, of course, life as a Dolphins fan, that's who they picked over one spot. They picked Tua one spot higher, which I at the time applauded. But what needs to happen is he needs to be that he needs to at least be the top 12 quarterback. Dolphins need to get to 10 or 11 wins and get into the playoffs that way and take a couple of cracks at this thing. That's their best route to success for me, because it sucks having the Bills in your division, because I think all expect them. If I'm not speaking for you guys, I expect them to win 12 or 13 games.
Yeah, absolutely.
I disagree with that, but that's just Brian. I think they're going to take a step back.
Russ is on an island on this. I'm not sure why, but yeah,
I'm going to explain why. I'm going to explain why, Brian. As someone that has watched the Patriots for many years and have watched the progression of Josh Allen, I know how pivotal a certain coach was to his development. Let's see how Ken Dorsey does continuing the development of Josh Allen, or does he take a step back because Brian Daboll's not there and doesn't have the Patriots playbook?
Okay, fair enough. Well, you seem pretty. I'll say too. I think they'll go 13-4 because I think Josh Allen's the best player in the league, and even Dable, as great as an offensive coach as he is, did he have a lot more to learn still? That's what I wonder when it comes to Josh Allen.
Well, that's the question, Brian. That's the question. If he becomes his own man, then some think that he will be, as you said, you have him as the MVP, then I'll be proven wrong. But until he does, I have my doubts of how great he's going to be until he can do it without Daboll.
If this was earlier in his career, to me, Russ, I think you might be more on to something. I just think at this point he's a little more developed than some of the younger guys. But I can see where you're coming from with that line of thinking. Brian, I want to ask you a question kind of stemming off what Russ just asked about Tua. Do you think this is a make or break year for him? Because I think the Dolphins have done a really nice job putting their roster together. Brian Flores, I thought didn't deserve to be fired, but they bring in a guy who certainly is creative on, from the offensive standpoint. We already know the Dolphins have a pretty strong defense, especially up front and in the secondary. Do you think this is a year where Tua kind of has no excuse? And look, I think the Patriots are very close to this situation with Mac Jones. We'll be talking about this next year with Mac Jones, but the way the quarterback contracts are in this league now, you really have like a 3-year evaluation window. And I think that with the way the Dolphins have positioned themselves from a roster standpoint, if the Dolphins don't make the playoffs, which I think they're right on that border right now, do you think that obviously we have to see how the season goes, but do you think Tua could be someone who they could look to replace next offseason if they don't make the playoffs and the Dolphins don't get to where they want to be?
100%. I think it is a make or break year because, listen, something drastic would have to happen for me to be the end of the year and say the Dolphins aren't in the playoffs, and you can in no way blame Tua for it because the defense is strong heading in. You've got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Even if one goes down, your receiving core is still pretty strong. You have an offensive coordinator who you could put a mannequin back there for the 49ers over the last couple of years, and they average 5 yards a carry. So, I don't see any way there is any excuse. You could say, well, what if he gets hurt? But if he gets hurt for the 6th year in a row, I think you kind of have your answer there too. So, when I look at Tua, look, he is never going to have the strongest arm. He's never going to be the biggest guy. I do think he brings skill sets that have not been accelerated yet and that we've seen glimpses of. Just for example, last year, if you look at when he got back in the Ravens game, and from that point to the end of the year, over 73% of his passes were either completed or dropped by the Dolphins receiver. So he is accurate. His feet and his eyes do connect well together. He can look off receivers. We have shown glimpses of that. But the question is this guy at the end of the day, is he another Kirk Cousins or Jimmy Garoppolo, middle of the pack, and at the end of the day, not good enough? That's what remains to be seen. So to me, he's got to have that stat line of Jimmy Garoppolo in 2019, over 4,000 yards passing, 29 touchdowns, and a playoff appearance, and probably a playoff win or two as well.
Yeah, no, I do think, I like what the Dolphins have put together. And so to me, I look at Mike McDaniel as fascinating because in some ways I love that he's not like this cookie cutter, like Dan Campbell kind of guy. Joe Judge at his introductory press conference, he seems very authentic, but his personality is definitely a little quirky. And so it's like, you can be a really smart offensive or defensive mind, but can you be a leader of men? Like your last head coach, Brian Flores, I think people gravitate to him. You've seen it. You saw it in New England. You saw it in Miami. I think you'll see it with the Steelers too, along with another great leader in Mike Tomlin. And so I look at the Dolphins and I say, if the Dolphins are not in the playoffs this year, I feel like it's hard for me to imagine another scenario that it's not either Mike McDaniel not being able to lead the way we want, or Tua to not kind of elevate, some of the talent around him. And 'cause to me, it's like if you're a Tua or you're a Mac Jones, you have to just be like a point guard in that offense, right? And just get guys in space, set people up to make plays. You have some great playmakers in Miami. What in your mind, do you agree with that? With Tua or Mike McDaniel probably being like, would that be someone that you would look to if they didn't have a good year? Or is there an area on the roster that I'm overlooking that concerns you specifically?
On paper, on the offense, the only position that really concerns me is right tackle with Austin Jackson, who I don't feel like should have been in a position to be a starter this year. I mean, he's been terrible the last 2 years, and I'd argue he wasn't very good at USC either. It was all potential with this guy. And the question I keep asking Dolphins fans is, if we get to halftime of the Patriots game, and Austin Jackson has ruined 2 drives, is that going to surprise you? And I think you'd be crazy to say that you'd be surprised by that. He hasn't been good, but they do have, 3 of the 5 players on their line are good. Armstead, Connor Williams at center, and Robert Hunt at right guard. Those are 3 really good pieces for them. Eichenberg and Austin Jackson have been major disappointments to this point. I think Eichenberg has an easier road at left guard to get better than Austin Jackson does, but that's the big thing. Austin Jackson protecting to his blind side is certainly something that keeps me worried.
And I think the Patriots are going to put Matt Judon on that side and kind of, I don't want to say overload, Austin Jackson, but I do think they're going to put their best front 7 player on him, because I just feel like they have to try to create some pressure here, because you can't let some of these, these fast receivers get downfield and have Tua give them a lot of time to get set up and have some big chunk plays. So I feel like they're going to try to take advantage of, Austin Jackson, overwhelm him a little bit, because you're probably, Teron Armstead has been tremendous as long as he's been healthy. Health is the name of the game for him. And so, with him being ready to go week 1, I'd be surprised if they didn't try to take advantage of that. But that's an interesting point. Steve, do you have anything for Brian?
Yeah. But first I want to go back to Russ about Josh Allen.
Sure.
In the divisional game last year, he got in a shootout on the road with Kansas City.
Yeah, he did.
And he gave his team the lead. I think it was with 19 seconds left.
Yep.
The reason they lost that game had nothing to do with Josh Allen. I thought that was the coming out moment for him, that he was going to continue to light it up through the playoffs and become the quarterback the Bills thought. So I think he's going to be just fine. But getting back to the game at hand here, excuse me, Brian, I was looking at this from kind of like a Dolphins lens, and this is a make or break year for Tua. But, part of the issue has been, of course, his injury history. But the other part was, I thought the Dolphins last year, with the exception of the last game of the year against New England, they were terrible running the football. How big an addition do you think Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert are to this offense, especially since they're going to incorporate this, whatever they call the wide zone, type of scheme?
I think it's absolutely huge. And it's the Dolphins in 2 of the last 3 years have been dead last in rushing, and they weren't all that good in 2020 either. And the fact that they had Myles Gaskin uncontested as a starting running back the last 2 years is nothing short of embarrassing. So getting Mostert and Edmonds in here, you immediately improve the team's speed. Edmonds, they signed 2 years, $12 million, just an hour into free agency. That was the guy they wanted to have. And he is somebody that's produced a lot, but hasn't been able to stay healthy for the Cardinals there in the last couple of years. In the passing game, he can create mismatches. So it's a dramatic improvement at the running back spot. Is a coach like Belichick, who's seen everything, is he going to be able to take away a lot of that downhill running? That's what I'm looking for in this game.
Excellent.
All right. Good stuff. Brian, want to transition. Let's talk a little bit about the game and just get your thoughts before we do that on the Patriots. Now here, and I'm just going to tell you this, that I've actually had the opportunity of being part of the media down at training camp for one day. And it's as bad as I've seen it. I've seen bad training camp practices, and it's been consistently bad, especially offensively. Not as bad defensively. Defensively, it's actually been pretty solid. But as someone that is not a Patriots fan, obviously following the league, what are your thoughts about the Patriots? Because I think it's easy to discount the Patriots because of what we've seen in training camp and in the preseason. Or is there a part of you that might be saying, wait a minute here, they might figure this out? I'm curious your thoughts on this.
My initial reaction is hearing all these reports about the Patriots and Mac Jones. And I know they lost Josh McDaniels. That's got to be a big part of this.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking personnel wise, what really changed? Pretty much nothing. I mean,
No.
They got Devontae Parker, who is a player I've always gone to bat for. And they've got the same two running backs. They've got Mac Jones. Their offensive line, I know they switched Trent Brown and Isaiah Wynn positions, but still, I mean, so I'm just a little befuddled by that. And it starts to get me thinking, like, I don't know, is there some 3D Belichick chess going on here?
I don't know.
Heading into this game, because who's really calling the plays and pulling the strings off?
Brian, we're going to find out on Sunday. I hate to go there, but we're going to find out. Everyone thinks it's Patricia, but I would not be shocked if it ends up being Belichick. I wouldn't be shocked.
I think it'll be Patricia actually physically calling the plays, but I just think Bill, the last few years, has really deferred offensively to Josh, and Josh has been really kind of like the assistant head coach, and Bill kind of has been focusing on the defense. And I think Bill's probably going to have his hand more on the offensive side this time, at least as far as
we'll see
game planning and things. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, nobody knows, Brian. Honestly, it's all I know, all I'm confident in is that whatever happens on Sunday will be a strong overreaction Monday. That's the only thing I feel very confident.
Either way, Brian.
Either way, good or bad,
way.
It's gonna
no doubt about it. One thing I'm really interested in for the Patriots is how you guys feel about their cornerback position here, because this is really one of the first years they haven't had. And the Patriots, correct me if I'm wrong, have always veered a lot more toward man-to-man defense as opposed to zone
now it's
in
more
the last
zone.
few years. What's that?
Now it's going to be more zone. We think it's going to be more zone.
That was my question, because that's and I think that's the Patriots' route for success going up against Waddle and Tyreek Hill. If you're going to just line up Jalen Mills and Jonathan Jones, and I've always liked Jonathan Jones a lot, and you've got Jones as your third and fourth cornerback too, I think, right? You've got three Joneses back there in the secondary.
Joneses, you were correct.
That's right.
Keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah, no kidding.
Too many of them. Too many, Brian. Too many.
So to me, it's forcing Tua to have 3 or 4 75, 80-yard drives throughout the game, confusing him against that zone defense and whatever Belichick throws up. To me, that's the Patriots' best chance to win this here. I mean, or confuse the Dolphins and confuse Tua.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be a really up and down season for the Patriots defense, because there's a lot of young players and a lot of newer players that are coming along. Now you do have Jalen Mills and Jonathan Jones at corner, and then you have 3 players, 2 rookies, and a second-year corner. So it's like you have a lot of inexperience there. And I think when you come with inexperience and young players, you're going to come with growing pains. So I think some games we're going to come out from a Patriots perspective, we're going to come out and say, wow, so-and-so stepped up. They had a good game, really nice development here. And I think some games you're going to say, damn, that double move just killed Jack Jones because he's an aggressive player. Something like that. In the past, I think, Bill has done a pretty good job against Tyreek Hill and done a nice job with Jonathan Jones, kind of matching him up speed for speed and having a true double team with the safety on the back end. I just don't think they have this luxury now, right now with the personnel they have. So I do think they'll go zone. And I do think, to your point, Brian, I think it's a good one, forcing the Dolphins to put together some long drives, I think could be a key, because it's going to be the traditional Belichick, bend, don't break defense. But I do think it's going to be a lot of kind of up and down, throughout each game.
Hey,
Absolutely.
Brian, I have one final question for you, and it involves the history of the Patriots and the Dolphins. I grew up with the Dolphins just destroying the Patriots in Miami year after year after year with Marino. And I'll tell you this:
to this day,
Marino is still one of my favorite quarterbacks. I'm a big Dan Marino fan, so I'll go all the way back with you on that. I can go even further back than Dan Marino. Go back to Brian Griese. Brian Griese. Geez, I can't believe I just said that, Steve. Not
Bob Griese.
Bob Griese. There's a Goldman for you. But here's my question for you, because someone threw out a stat. I don't know the exact stat, but the Patriots going down to Miami seem to have much better luck in September and October than obviously at the end of the year. And the Patriots actually, weather-wise, have practiced in 90-degree temperature for I don't know how long this summer. They might be better prepared this time around, and they're also already down in Miami for the weather. How much of a weather factor, positively or negatively, will it have on this game for the Patriots? I'm curious your thoughts on this.
It's a great question, and my understanding is there's about a 60% chance of rain, highs of 91, 92. So, yeah, it goes right in that sweet spot. First, it's never made any sense for me of why the Dolphins have been able to get the better of the Patriots for the last 10 or 15 years in Miami. It doesn't make any sense regardless of what month you play. I mean, that one year
Right.
where you have A.J. Feely and Darius Thompson.
Oh, I remember.
In 2004. That was, gosh.
Oh, I remember. Oh, I remember that.
Man.
That
That
big
hurt.
comeback win.
Yeah.
That hurt. I remember that, Brian. I remember that.
But to answer your question, to address the weather, to me, the I think that what the Patriots game plan has to be, if they are trying to get their footing on offense, is to pound Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris in this game and wear down that Dolphins defensive line and try to, I don't think the Dolphins offense is good enough to say you have to slow this game down, but it makes a lot of sense to say, hey, we're going to go head to head with you in this heat and we're going to beat you using the running game because we're going to just power away at you and we're going to win this game 20-17. I think that's the Patriots' best chance there offensively to really not just win the game, but control.
The question is,
too.
will they be able to do it, Brian? Because if they go with the way that they have used the Patriots offense for so many years, the answer would be yes. With this new McVay/Shanahan style offense, it hasn't worked at all. So I don't know. I agree with you, but I have a feeling Belichick might do what you're saying and just scrap it for a week or not do it as much as we think that they're going to do it. Kind of like you said, maybe do a chess move, but we'll see. We'll see.
Brian, who's the best player on the Dolphins defense that Patriots fans should know and no one's talking about enough? Is it someone like a Javon Holland? Is it a Jalen Phillips coming out kind of breakout season? Who's the player that people should know in New England and who are not being talked enough about?
I'd put them both on the defensive line, Jalen Phillips and Christian Wilkins. They, in the second half of last year, played very, very well, and they've looked even better so far this summer. Jalen Phillips had 8.5 sacks as a rookie, didn't play as many snaps in the front part of the year, but if Wilkins and Phillips can continue to take that next step on the same defensive line with Emmanuel Ogbah and Zach Sealer and Raekwon Davis, this could be a top 5 defensive line that combines with a secondary that's also top 5 when they have Byron Jones at cornerback. So the pieces are really coming together defensively, and that's why it was so important to keep this unit together. And also, Javon Holland and Xavier Howard in the secondary as well. Because, look, the Dolphins' defenses could be completely different in 2 years. Byron Jones and Howard are going to be on the wrong side of 30. Wilkins and Phillips are going to want money. And right now they're on rookie contracts. So this right now is the Dolphins' time to pounce defensively.
Do you have concerns at linebacker similar to your concerns at offensive line, or is that maybe not as strong? Because it seems like, from my perspective, offensive line, linebacker, probably the 2 position groups that you have some questions about, at least from my vantage point. What say you?
If this were 20 years ago and everyone started 3 off-ball linebackers, it would be more of a concern. It's not. It's the weakest part of the defense. Jerome Baker covers a lot of ground, but I think they tend to. I think they overpaid him. You're talking about somebody making about $10 million a year. Landon Roberts, who you guys are very familiar with, he's a
Who?
good thumper, but I mean, it's kind of mind blowing to me that he's in his third year as starter, given that he's just a 2-down linebacker. Duke Riley, I think, is an underrated player, covers a lot of ground. I think you could switch him out with Baker and really not lose much.
I can't tell you how much crap the Patriots got for Landon Roberts, Brian.
Man, he's a tough guy, but
He is.
Yep.
And he caught that 50-yard pass against
yeah, I
us
forgot
when he
about
was a fullback.
the fullback play.
Yeah,
right.
I tell you what, on 4th and 1, over the last 3 years, I haven't seen a better player in the league. But if you take him outside of 4th and 1, he can't cover his own shadow. So that's a concern, and that's where I think if you establish the running game with Stevenson and Damian Harris, and you get a Hunter Henry lined up on a Landon Roberts, I think you got a major mismatch there.
Okay, Brian. Before we let you go, we need a prediction from you on the game.
Yeah, it's Dolphins are favored by 3.5. First game of the year, Dolphins being at home. Stadium's going to be rocking. A lot of excitement here that we haven't seen in the last 10 or 15 years. That isn't saying much, but I'm going to go with the home team. I'm going to say 23-17 Dolphins. I think it'll be a little lower of a scoring game, but I think it's going to come down to the wire, just really like it did twice last year.
All right, Brian, listen, thank you so much for joining us. You gave us a wonderful half hour. Give our audience a nice preview of the Miami Dolphins. And I'm going to say it, I don't care what anyone says. Best of luck the rest of the season, Brian.
Well, you're a bigger man than I am. I wish you all three the worst of luck here. I always tell Derek, I say I can't say good luck, but I hope you do enjoy the game.
Okay, Brian, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to follow Brian on Twitter, it's BrianCatNFL, and Brian's from On the Fin Side. Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Brian. We'll talk soon.
Okay, that was Brian from On the Fin Side. Coming up next, guys, we're going to preview the upcoming game for the Patriots against the Dolphins and also give our season prediction. Okay, guys, let's get back to it. Steve, opening thoughts on our discussion with Brian.
Oh, it was good. He's very knowledgeable, and, he knows his team, and he's not jumping the shark on, their chances this year. I know a lot of people have them doing a lot better this year. One guy from, I think it was the New York Post, picked the Dolphins to win the Super Bowl.
Wow.
There you go.
Okay.
I think Brian is coming at it though I think he sounded cautiously optimistic, and I think he's
very level-headed.
I think the Dolphins have put together a nice roster. There are some obviously holes that we talked about, and he addressed, and but I'm curious to see how it goes. Honestly, I said this to him already, but I'll reiterate. I'm not sure where exactly the Dolphins finish the season. I do think they're a playoff bubble team, but I will be surprised if whenever the Dolphins, assuming they do not win the Super Bowl, Steve, and they fall short, I just wonder if we're not saying it isn't someone other than Tua or Mike McDaniel. Because I think with Mike McDaniel, it's like you listen to some of his. I know, Russ, you said you put a lot into the press conference, but I do think
I've heard it though. I've heard it.
It is weird though. It's like he's funny. He seems, but he's a little quirky, and I just feel like that's something that's really kind of like funny now. But if they're like 4-8, I don't think it's going to be as funny anymore. So I don't think they'll get.
When
to
you
that,
win, it doesn't matter, Derek.
Exactly.
If he wins, it won't matter because
that'd be something where now expectations are a little bit higher in Miami. Yep. So it's like, okay, if they're doing really well and the season starts to turn on, I just think the funny guy quirkiness will get old quick. I don't know, but it's nice that he is not like Mr. Rah Rah guy, but it's definitely unique.
No, listen, I listened to it and I understand why this is being pointed out by some as maybe a weakness of the coach, but being a coach is a different thing. But to your point, Derek, it's the press conference is one thing. Can he lead men? Yeah. That's more important because Belichick has been the worst person with press conferences for how long, but he can lead men.
Sure.
Can McDaniel lead men? And then if he can, it won't matter. That's my thoughts on him. It won't matter. It's funny because I've watched it and I've watched the local media here just call him a tool bag basically. But you know what? I don't look at it that way. He became a head coach for a reason. and he'll have his chance to prove himself. That's the way I look at it.
And the big thing to look at him, when he was in San Francisco, to quote a Belichick thing, he got all of his guys on the offense to buy in.
Right.
And when you get everyone to buy in, you get everyone working together, good things tend to happen. So, it'll be curious now to go from just the offensive coordinator to overall head coach and see how things work. But, I think his track record as offensive guy kind of speaks for itself.
Yep.
And, we'll see how it all plays out. I do think they've assembled a really good roster. And ultimately, like Derek and Brian were saying earlier, they'll probably go as far as Tua can take them. But I think they have a much better running game this year, which will definitely help the quarterback. Because last year, they couldn't run the ball on anyone all season long, with the exception of the last week.
Right.
So, that puts a lot of pressure on a young quarterback.
Yeah, and that's been Mac Jones's best friend last year, was that running game,
Right.
Yes.
So,
and to Brian's point, Derek, and I'm sorry to break in.
No.
Brian's telling us the Patriots need to pound the rock, right? And I'm thinking to myself, how the hell are they going to do it? Because they haven't done it all summer. But we'll see if this is more of a little bit of a Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope, where they actually do go back to the Patriots' tried and true offense and just run it down their throats. They might. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, put it this way. I know it's ignore the noise down there, but people are hearing what everyone else is saying.
Of course they are.
Every single beat writer, locally, it's on national stuff. It's fans. Everyone is talking about the Patriots offense. So there's no doubt in my mind that over the last 2 weeks, they've been going through a bunch of stuff. I don't think Bill's dumb. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that I feel like they're not going to bang their head against the wall.
No, he's never done that, Derek.
So,
he's absolutely never done that.
I have a hard time believing the running game won't be effective. Now, will it be as effective if the Patriots offensive line, which I feel like has been a big struggle so far from what we've seen, if the Dolphins defensive line wins that matchup, then the running game could be potentially, hindered, and then you're kind of in trouble there. But I'm interested. I'm interested to see. And to your point, Steve, going to the running backs for Miami, you had two guys in Edmonds and Mostert who are extremely fast. Waddle, Hill, both fast. I mean, there's a lot of speed on that offense. So it's going to be interesting to watch. See how these teams match up together.
Okay. Before we break down the game, we're going to go through our season predictions. So, Derek, I'll give you first crack at this. I'll go to Steve, and I'll end up with my prediction. And I'll just say my prediction, I'm not changing since I said it in June. So I'm back in what I said back then. Derek, go ahead, share your season prediction.
I'm somewhere, like I said before, I'm somewhere between 8-9 and 10-7. I'll go 9-8. I just think I think that they have some good things going for them, for the Patriots. I just feel like there's a lot of inexperience in some very key positions. And like I said to Brian earlier, I think, guys, we're going to be coming out of some of these games and being like, wow, Jack Jones really made a play here, or Marcus Jones made a play, or somebody like that, or they just didn't have the guys to cover. They weren't able to keep up from a speed standpoint. I think the offense, I know everyone's freaking out. I think the offense will get to good enough to compete, but I'm not sure I have the confidence that they're going to be able to elevate and get into shootouts yet. I just haven't. I have a hard time after the last few months saying that. So I just think they have a lot of inexperience and youth at some key positions, and I just think they're a 500 ball club. So okay. I'll say 9-8. I'll give them the 1 over 500 because I do have faith in Bill. That he'll be putting it together.
Okay, over to you, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've been trying to do this simplified offense with the Shanahan McVay style, whatever you want to call it. It hasn't been working. I don't think they're going to try to beat their head against the wall this week. We might see a couple of plays where they're going to continue to work on it. I'm sure they've been working on some of it in practice. I think they're going to go back to what they know best, and that is, power running, and they need to get some quick hitters, inside the tackles and get the running game going. Because if they're, Derek actually stole my question about Miami's linebackers, because I think if they can get to that second level, they're going to have some success. So I think the big key, is moving forward is you have to keep the games within reach until the offense finds its identity. And again, I said I thought they could win 11 games. I'm going to temper that a little bit. 10 or 11, I think they're going to get it figured out.
Okay, good stuff. All right. So as some might know, and if you don't know, I predicted back in June 12-5, and Derek actually wanted me to go week by week. I'm not going to do that, Derek, but I'm just going to explain why I'm not changing my prediction. And I've been down there and I've seen exactly what everyone's been saying. And listen, it's easy to chop it off and say, you know what, I'm going to dial it back. But then I think I'd be a fraud. So I'm not going to be a fraud here, just me personally, by changing it. I'm going to own it and say 12-5 because I made the prediction a while ago. That's just me. I want to stick by the prediction. And I feel strong about the prediction. I'm going to tell you why. The Bryans are not in the division anymore. Brian Flores and Brian Daboll are not in the division. That, to me, gives the Patriots a chance to get victories against the Dolphins and the Bills. That's where I'm going on that. They had 10 wins before. There is the ability, I think. They've added to the offense. We were talking to Brian, and Brian's like, well, all the weapons are the same. No, they're not. They've actually added. They added, some don't think, but they added, I think, a very high-quality receiver in Devontae Parker, and I think he's going to be a difference maker. Plus, you have a lot of these wide receivers and Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, second year. Tyquan Thornton will be a factor too. So okay. I think they're better offensively. But what makes me want to stick with this prediction, guys, and I understand why someone would want to change. I get that, but I'm not going to, is the defense. Now, I'm telling you, the one thing that the three of us have been screaming about for the longest time is speed. We just talked about how much speed the Miami Dolphins have. I'm not saying that the Patriots have the same type of speed, but they are so much faster than they were a year ago. So much. It's not even close. This defense looks so much quicker, so much faster. That can give you a win or two. And the coaching with Belichick, and we'll see how everything plays out with the assistants, but ultimately, it's Belichick. I've heard here locally, well, you can't just talk about Belichick as the reason why. I'm not talking about Belichick as the reason why. But if you tell me I can't give him a factor, you can go screw. He's a factor. He is a huge factor.
He's a factor, but he's not a factor in why you would win more games than you did last year, right? Because that wouldn't make sense.
Why wouldn't he be if your roster has a second year in the system that you have been implementing? A good part of your roster is now implemented for another year.
That's where you and I break off, but continue.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, we can disagree. I also have the Patriots winning the division. And this goes back to my thoughts on the Buffalo Bills. And I know everyone has penciled them in as winning the division, maybe going to the Super Bowl, and Josh Allen being your MVP. The reason why I'm doubting this, and Derek and Steve, you brought up a great point. Can he elevate his game without Brian Daboll? Yeah, he can. He can turn into Peyton Manning, but he hasn't yet. So let's see if he turns into Peyton Manning. Or is he Kurt Warner without Mike Martz? Because Kurt Warner, he is a Hall of Famer, but he made his bones with Mike Martz. He wasn't the same quarterback after Mike Martz. He was a good
shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, but that's a side point.
Okay, but I'm using Kurt Warner as the example because Kurt Warner was a worldly quarterback under Mike Martz. It changed when he left. Will it change for Josh Allen? I'm just throwing it out there that Brian Daboll is a huge loss for the Buffalo Bills. They don't have their playbook. They don't have the Patriots playbook anymore.
And like I said earlier, I think that if Allen hadn't already gotten into the level he's at or he showed last year, I think that you would be right. I don't feel that way now because he's already been a top 5 quarterback in the league. He's not going to I don't think he's going to regress to the point where you're going to notice, like you're saying. I do think that your point is a valid one, but I worry more about someone like Mac Jones who loses a Josh McDaniels in his second year than a Josh Allen who loses a Brian Daboll in his fifth. So
I'm also having some doubts of their head coach, who happens to be now talked about as some of the best. No, because McDermott is a hothead, and McDermott, let's be honest, when he has dealt with adversity, has choked. He choked against the Patriots.
I think he's let his emotions overcome him, and he's missed some things on the sidelines.
And I think that's an issue. That's where I'm going on that. I'm not saying he's not a great coach. I'm just saying he's an emotional, fiery guy, and that can be a negative sometimes in the NFL in pressure situations.
I'm just mentioning this so we can move on to the preview, but Patriots captains are announced. Offense, David Andrews, Mac Jones. Defense, Stephen McCourty, Dietrich Wise, Juwan Bentley, and Matthew Slater. So those are your captains for the team. I was a little surprised with Dietrich Wise, but I know he just did receive the Ron Burton's Community Service Award, and he's thought pretty highly in that building. So not too many surprises. I think no one's surprised that Mac Jones is the captain this year. That was pretty much expected. So
all right, good stuff, guys. Let's break down the game. Before we get into it, I have to ask both of you a huge topic here in New England. Are you guys ready for the topic? It involves the Patriots leaving early from Miami. That this is a sign of panic from the Patriots. I completely and utterly disagree. I think they planned this maybe 5 or 6 months ago. So I don't see this as a negative. Steve, I'm telling you, this has become a huge topic here. Your thoughts on the Patriots leaving early from Miami?
No, I think it's a good move.
So do I. I don't get it.
And you brought up the point that they tend to do a little bit better early in the season rather than later. Yeah. And that's because early in the season right now, you're still getting very warm days, not as hot as Miami, obviously not even close, but you're still in the summer.
Yeah.
You're in warm weather. So it's still there's a acclimation period. I mean, because when you get off the plane down here, it's hot. Okay.
Right. But it's been hot here too. Yeah.
Right. When you do it in December, you're different. Coming from the cold of New England, and then it's hitting you like a blast furnace. So I think it's a good move. You get acclimated to the heat and humidity. And I'm here to tell you right now, it's hot down here. It's supposed to be 95 today.
Wow.
And the humidity sky high. So that is, I think it's a smart move. You get the team out, you get used to practicing and running around in the heat. And then by Sunday, it's not a kick in the face when you go out there.
Yeah, Devin McCourty called it a shock to the system. You're right. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense because if for example, Arizona, where I spent a good deal of my life, very dry. If you go to if I go to my Florida or even in New England, like hot, humid day, it's a very, very different type of heat.
And it affects your hair, right, Derek? Look at your hair. It would affect your hair.
It is all over the place. And it's a very different type of heat. And I don't think it's a panic move. That's just such a typical Boston media thing to say.
Oh, it's been a big topic here, Derek. Big topic.
Oh yeah, I've heard. So I feel like, to your point, Russ, this had to have been planned for months ago.
Yeah.
I mean, there's too many moving parts. There's a lot of things that go into it. I do think it's fair to call it unconventional. It is a little bit different. Now if they do like back-to-back West Coast games or something, they have stayed, on one side of the country for longer to avoid going back and forth. I know that when they come to Arizona later in the season, they are staying here or they're staying in Vegas because they play the Raiders the following week. So they're going to be on this side of the country for an extended period of time. That makes sense to me. But it is a little weird. I think a lot has been made of it. Put it this way, guys. I mean, the reason that it's even a story is because they've looked like crap all summer long. So if the Patriots, if Josh McDaniels was still here and the offense didn't look like a pile of garbage, then no one would be talking about this. But because they've struggled in the summer and people want to overreact to everything, that's why this is a story. So.
Okay. All right. Fair enough, Derek. All right. I'm going to go right back to you. We're going to go back to how we used to always break down these games. So, Derek,
first one of the year. Let's go.
What?
Said first breakdown of the year.
First breakdown of the year. Which team has the advantage, Derek, when the Patriots are on offense and the Dolphins are on defense in the passing game? Who do you give the advantage to?
I give the advantage to the Dolphins. The Dolphins secondary is very good. It's very deep, very versatile, like the pieces they have in place. Javon Holland is a player that I think Bill would love to have on his team. If you pay attention to him when you're watching this game, he'll pop out. He's always around the ball, kind of can do a lot of different things. It's a fun matchup. I have the hard time giving the Patriots the advantage in offense on anything, just based on what we've seen. But I'm hoping that we see them kind of put it together and get back to some of the things that we know they can do well, like you said earlier, Russ. But advantage Dolphins in this case.
I agree with that, especially with their pass rush and the lack of protection that Mac Jones has suffered during the preseason.
Okay. Over to you, Steve. The running game. The Patriots are on offense and the Dolphins are on the defense. What do you give the advantage to? Based on what we've seen, you would think it has to be the Dolphins, right? But what if the Patriots?
I'm going to flip-flop on that one. I'm going to give it to the Patriots because I think they're going to go back to what they know best.
Okay.
And, they tried doing this at the end of the game last year. If you remember, that was a close, low-scoring game. It was in New England. And they seemed poised that they were going to wear down the Dolphins and win the football game, either with a touchdown or a field goal, and then Damian Harris fumbled.
That's right.
And I think they're going to go back to that. I do. Okay. I think they're going to try to turn this into a slugfest and wear down that Miami front seven, because that's the only way you're going to get some pass protection for Mac Jones is you have to wear those guys down. And you do that with the running game. So I think Belichick's going to go back to that. I think they're going to be able to run the ball.
And I think that could be the matchup of the game. Patriots offensive line versus the Dolphins defensive line. I think we could look back at that and say that maybe is the difference in this game. Okay.
Steve, right back over to you. Let's talk about the Patriots defense against the Dolphins offense in the passing game. It could be scary, but as we're talking about, there's still doubts about Tua. What do you give the advantage to?
I give it to Miami because they, as we talked about, they have so much speed. And there's a lot of new faces on the Patriots defense this year. Not that I'm downgrading their ability. I think they're going to be really good this year. But it's all going to come down. And again, like I said with Mac Jones, it's all going to come down to how well the Dolphins protect Tua. Because I think the Patriots game plan is going to try to make him hold on to the football a little bit longer instead of those quick hitters that they've been, doing with him. And I think that if they're able to do that, they'll be able to get home, especially like Derek mentioned earlier in the show, Matthew Judon against their right tackle who's been struggling. So I think that's an area that the Patriots are going to have to try to take advantage of. But I still give the advantage to Miami because they have a lot of guys that can run.
Okay. How about you, Derek, when we switch it to the Patriots defense versus the Dolphins offense in the running game? We're talking to Brian. And when you look at the Niners, listen, it can become a prolific running offense. So your thoughts here?
I'm a little worried about a lot of the unknowns in this game. And there's some new personnel except for the Patriots. How is Mike McDaniel's system going to be implemented? Yep. I think when it's coached the right way and installed the right way and executed the right way, it's deadly. We've seen that on a lot of different teams. But I'm curious to see how Miami kind of executes it. I have really liked what I've seen from Anthony Jennings across from Judon in the preseason. But I have to say, it's also preseason. So,
thank you, Steve Balsherry, by the way.
Yeah, we need to see him do it in live action games.
Steve's never given up on Anthony Jennings.
No, he never has, even when I absolutely cut him like 3 months ago. And I have liked what I've seen from some of the linebackers, but There's some good speed on that Dolphins backfield. I just have my reservations a little bit. I also have watched Chase Edmonds a lot, and I think he stinks. I think he's very inconsistent, but he's fast. And I've also we've seen undrafted free agents come into this system for the Shanahan style offense.
Oh yeah,
and
just
be
light it up.
Absolutely light it up. So I'm curious to see how it all works out. I'm going to give the advantage to the Dolphins for now, a slight advantage.
Okay, all right. Well, now it's time to really break this down. Let's go with 3 keys to victory. Mr. Balsjeri, give me your 3 keys to victory and then a prediction for the game.
I think the Patriots need to control the tempo running the football. As I mentioned earlier, I think that they should be able to do that if the offensive line fires off and they can wear down Miami's, front seven. I think the other thing that the other key for a Patriots victory is play action. If the running game works, play action needs to be spot on in this game. I think, with that pass rush, they're going to have to do some quick hitters of their own. I think guys like Devontae Parker and Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers, they're going to figure prominently in this game if the Patriots win. And the number 3 key is, which again, I already mentioned, that is, they have to force Tua to hold on to the football a little bit longer. They have some improved pass rush guys on this team, and I think they need to get home.
Okay. And what's your prediction, Steve?
I'm going to drink the Patriots Kool-Aid in week 1. I think after all this negativity, and again, like Derek said, it's going to be way overreaction either way. I think they're, 21-20.
Wow. Okay. All right. Over to you, Mr. Havens. 3 keys to victory, and then your prediction after that.
First key is GTFB.
Oh, we know what that
flip
is.
Back, okay? Because I think there's a lot of speed here. Obviously, we talked about it, and you got to, this team's going to have to keep everything kind of in front of them. I also think tackling is an absolute must. I mean, you got to be sure tackling this week because you miss a tackle on Tyreek on the outside, and then he can add another 10, 20, 30 yards in a hurry. My second key for me is something we just talked about. I think the Patriots offensive line has to win that matchup against the defensive line. It's a tall order. I'm really concerned about several pieces on the offensive line. I think they have the potential to be very solid, but I don't feel overly optimistic. Like I said, I'm feeling a little pessimistic about a few things based on what we've seen. Again, we have to see it during the regular season, kind of get it out. And the third thing for me, guys, is I think the Patriots need to have success on offense early in this game. All this talk about the Patriots offense, it's, gotten to the point where it's, ludicrous. We need to see them put together a good, solid drive early. I think get some momentum. I think it will kind of quiet all the whispers and get some confidence in that group. I think the first 2 drives are specifically key. And I think going off Steve's point with play action, I think the Patriots taking advantage of the Dolphins in some crossing routes, taking advantage of their linebackers, I think could be a key. But offensively, I want them to get it going early.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, and what's your prediction?
I have the Dolphins winning this 24-20. I just don't feel good about what I've seen from the Patriots the last few months. I don't have a lot of confidence in them right now. And the Dolphins have taken care of business the last few years, the majority of the time. Now, could that be the Brian Flores effect, to Russ's point earlier? I think that's possible. But I think the Dolphins have a better team 1 through 53. And until I see the Patriots kind of get what we've seen in the last few months out of my head, I can't take them.
Okay. And Derek, I understand where you're going on this, and it makes sense. But so one thing that I've learned following this team and us doing a podcast, even before we did a podcast following the Patriots, there was one year. And again, I'm not comparing the year. I'm just saying that I've seen this before. The predictions of doom. And believe it or not, it was the 2007 Patriots where Randy Moss did not practice. We did not see him practice once. The media didn't see it, and they were doubting it. They were doubting it big time.
And then they lit it up that year.
And they just lit it up. I'm not saying it's going to happen here because I doubt it's going to happen here. But the one thing that I've learned is that it's not always about the talent on the team. It involves being able to execute and let me also say being coached well. If they're coached well and you execute, you can get more out of less. I hope the Patriots get more out of less, and I do think that they have some talent that's being overlooked as well.
I hope they can be coached well.
So we'll see. We'll see. Because as far as I know, the greatest coach ever is still coaching them. So that's my trump card, and I'm going to continue to use it. So my prediction, and I'm going to go with Steve a little bit. I'm going to say 23-21, which is a weird number. Steve went 20. What was it? 22-21, Steve?
What's that?
He went 21. Steve went 21-20 Patriots.
I went 21-20.
21-20? Okay. Screw it. I'm going to go 21-17 Patriots. I'll change it. I'll go 21-17. Just to be different. I'm going to go 21-17 Patriots. Okay. Great show, guys. Fantastic show. Before we go, major thank you to Brian from On the Fin Side. Please do follow him on Twitter at BrianCatNFL. Highly recommended. He was very nice to join us, and it was a great interview. And I also want to mention, because I know Ian was wondering, why hasn't I mentioned it yet? Subscribe on Apple Podcasts. And please say something nice about Derek and Steven. You can call me an a-hole. It's fine. I'm used to that. Do what you want, but it will help Patriots fans find us. You can totally rip me apart, totally rip me for my predictions. Please feel free to. All right.
Yeah, I'm just glad we didn't go game by game, because I didn't want to end up on the radio.
Okay, well, that's
Don't ask Russ to show his don't ask Russ to show his work. By the way, apparently that's a trigger point for him.
No.
How dare I ask?
How dare you ask?
How he came to his realization of the season? But
I thought I did a good. Okay. I thought I did a good idea of explaining how I got there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's gonna do it for this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. For Derek Havens and Steve Balsher and Russ Goldman, thank you as always for watching and listening to Patriots 4th and 2, the official podcast of PatsFans.com.